Today's vlog is gonna be all about this little guy. Wore this coat or hoodie because Google said it was 20 out right now. It is not 20 out right now. It feels way warmer than that. And this snow is just way too bright out here. I'm gonna just be permanently squinting this whole vlog. I hope that's okay. It's bright. The videos aren't looking good. I am going to go ahead and say, let's try this tomorrow. It's gonna be about 2 seconds from now. So I will see you. I don't want this video to get too long, so I'm going to split this into just 2 main segments of this point and shoot. 1, stills, 2, video. First off, let's take some stills with this camera. Am I covering the mic? Okay. One thing that I have noticed about this camera, the aperture doesn't open up very wide. You're not gonna get that creamy background blur with this camera like you will with a camera like this. So that's one thing to look out for. Here's a quick comparison between the 2 shots. You're not gonna get that creamy bokeh. However, this is a lot bigger and it cannot fit in my pocket. Like this guy can. I do see some boats down there. I understand the video that this is not a video portion, this is stills portion, but I want to illustrate to you how amazing this zoom is. Check this out. So this is my standard vlogging focal length, and this is how far the zoom can go, and this is all 100% optical zoom. Not bad. One cool thing about this is the zoom framing assistant. There's a little button on here that you can push to zoom quickly out, and then when you let it go, it zooms back in. When you're zoomed in super far, it's hard to track your subject, so this kind of helps you back out for 1 second, find your subject again, and then go back in. All right, I gotta find a better spot. This is just too swampy. Bugs everywhere, mosquitoes everywhere, goose poop everywhere. We are relocating. Free sunglasses though. Check those out. Jeans were a terrible, terrible idea. You see all that sweat? That is from bad decision making. I am an outdoors person, I swear. I guess I'm just grumpy today. I don't know. The close-ups on this camera are actually not too bad. I mean, I do prefer something a little bit with a little bit more bokeh, but you do get some background separation on this camera, which is it's pretty surprising to me considering how small it is. Really been putting this part off because I don't like taking selfies. A lot of people do though, so here's some selfies. So it looks like it has some kind of software to create like a fake bokeh behind me since the aperture is not quite wide enough to be able to do it optically. If you do like selfies, that is what they look like with the background blur in portrait mode. It's kind of a workaround for the absence of a nice creamy background on this camera. One thing that I like about this camera in the stills department is the wide shots. Canon's color is great in this point and shoot. In those wide landscape shots, your apertures ain't gonna be very wide open anyway, so you can play to the strengths of this Canon, bringing out great colors. You don't really need to edit it too much. Just right out of the camera, it looks pretty great. So that is a big time plus. I'd say my favorite feature on this camera in terms of stills is the burst shooting. And the burst shooting Plus this zoom makes for great nature shots, great sports shots. Any action shot where there's a lot of movement going on, you gotta capture just like a split second. This camera's great at that. I'm just trying to get some photos out here, and there's random like mosquito swarms hiding in the ground. Hold on guys. This is ridiculous. Maybe because people aren't going out as often, these mosquitoes are like more aggressive. Maybe they're hungry. Moving on to the video. We are going to hurry this thing up. Video now. Wow, look at that. Is that like a... Sorry, that's a mosquito biting me. That's like a baby... What's up, little guy? So the thing that I don't like about this camera, I guess I shouldn't say I don't like it, I still like it, but it's a big drawback is that all of video is in one single mode. I mean, it has portrait mode, it has sports mode, it has food mode, all of these different photo modes, but one single video mode. You can't control the shutter speed, you can't control the aperture, you can't control ISO. You can't really control where it's focusing. I mean, it has a manual focus option, but you're just using the buttons to click back and forth. And so the focus kind of like shifts in segments instead of continuously. You can't really rack focus. It feels more like shooting with a cell phone, but with a great zoom lens, better color, better clarity. And so you do have to do some workarounds, like I can't rack focus, make cool looking shots like that. You kind of have to like trick the camera into doing those things for you, like that. Nope. But still works. I do wish there were more options with video. Also, sometimes when you zoomed in all the way, the focus is just complete garbage. There was an airplane there. It would have been cool. So, I mean, that's something that you don't notice when I'm taking those still photos. They're nice, crispy in focus, but it does miss focus a lot. In a still photo, you only need to keep the focus for that split millisecond that you're shooting the photo, which is why they look great. In video, sometimes you have to maintain focus for prolonged periods of time, and in a wide shot like this, it's doing fine. I can move my head around like this, I can come in, come out, it keeps focus. But for those more telephoto shots, it has a much harder time keeping focus. It does shoot in 60 frames per second, which is nice because I can slow down the video later to half speed, make sort of cinematic looking shots with it. It can also, there we go, that's nasty. It could also deal with backlit shots pretty well. The sun is super bright out right now, and it's right behind my head, and still it can properly expose my face. So that is something that this camera does super well. Turn the other way around. It does take a little bit of time to adjust in terms of exposure, but it gets there. One other important part of the video portion of this camera is the optical image stabilization, OIS. And for those of you who don't know what OIS means, that's when the camera physically shifts to account for any bumps or movement in the camera, whether it's the sensor inside, whether it's the lens, whether it's both. Something inside of the camera shifts to compensate. In this case, it's the sensor that's shifting. This is my arm fully extended, walking, talking. If you're a vlogger, this is gonna be a lot of your footage. This is what it looks like. I haven't done any warp stabilization, no digital stabilization. This is all optical. This is all on the camera, and this is it's pretty rock solid. It can shoot in 4K, however there is a pretty noticeable crop factor in 4K. This is what I look like in 1080p. I shoot it all in 1080 with this camera just because it can shoot 60 frames per second in 1080, only 30 frames per second in 4K. 4K has a big crop factor as well. This is what it looks like. So this is me in 1080. And this is me in 4K, and this is as far out as it can zoom, so you get nice and close. And this is just not like, I mean, my face is in this, like this is literally as far as my arm can extend. 4K is not really, I don't like it for vlogging. I never really use it. And as you noticed, I said that it can shoot 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second. This brings up the next point. It cannot shoot 24 frames per second. For those of you who love 24 frames per second, which is most of you out there, it can't shoot 24 frames per second. If that's a deal breaker for you, don't get this camera. It can't shoot 24. Personally, I like 30. It's just more universal. Every camera can shoot 30. I don't know, just a preference thing. I think 30 looks a little smoother. I like it. Sorry for any controversy that this may cause, but 30 is the best frame rate. Finally, the sound. There's one microphone on the top of this camera, so you do have to be mindful of where you're holding it. It's also pretty susceptible to wind. When I flip the screen upwards like this, it's a little bit better. It blocks the wind pretty well, but it's a real bummer that it's so susceptible to wind. It's not directional at all. Whether you're in front of the camera, to the side, behind it, it'll catch everything equally. I won't take out any wind noise from this vlog though, so what you hear is pretty much what it'll sound like on a lightly breezy day. This is pretty much an average day. So a recap on the stills. For stills, this camera is pretty solid. I would say that the disadvantages that it has in stills is that its aperture is just too small. You can't open the aperture. You can't get any depth of field going here. And everybody right now loves shallow depth of field. So that's a big bummer that you can't get it with this camera that costs $400. It has portrait mode, which is a way to artificially add depth of field, but so does pretty much every single cell phone out there. So I did kind of expect a little more in that area. Its strengths. So the strengths of the stills, it has a great zoom lens. Canon's color science is just top notch, so any landscape photos you're taking are gonna be great. Any telephoto shots, action shots, sports shots, you can take pretty solid action shots. The burst mode is good enough, the autofocus is good enough to get pretty nice sports or nature shots. And this camera can fit in your pocket. You cannot find a better option in this small of a body for nature and sports shots. So that's where I think it shines in terms of photos. And now onto video. Video, it is what it is. It's kind of just like a cell phone 2.0. You can't adjust anything about the video, as I said before. Despite all those things that I don't like, I think the biggest weakness of the video is the audio. It only has one mic, and the mic is not that great. So susceptible to wind, and like, look at this shot. I have to pick a backlit shot because if I face this way and get a properly exposed shot, the wind is blowing right into the camera. I'm using that screen to block the wind from the microphone. And so I sometimes have to choose between a backlit shot and a windy shot. And so right now I'm picking the backlit shot. And so that is one big time downer. That's what I think the biggest weakness of this camera is in terms of video. Strengths of this camera for video. It has facial recognition. I don't think I talked about that. It'll prioritize the focus, the exposure based on the face. It'll outline it in a rectangle so that you know and that it's recognizing that you are indeed a human. It has a flip up screen so you can see what you're shooting if you're a vlogger. That's great for video. It can shoot 60 frames per second, so you can slow down your shots to half speed. It can shoot in 4K, and there is a crop factor, yes, but 4K is still pretty nice to have in a camera that only costs $400, especially if you're shooting something a little bit further out. You can't shoot close-up things in 4K. You can't shoot any wide shots in 4K, but but it does have 4K as an option for you. And finally, the color science of Canon. I mean, that's what they're known for, and this camera, the color science is great. That is it for today's video, today's quick field testing of the Canon SX740 HS, and yes, I'm just reading it right off the camera. It's just a long name. That's another weakness of the camera. Please pick a cooler name, Canon. Please. If you want a more in-depth review, I have a more in-depth review. Go ahead and check it out. I have it linked. Sit-down overview, not as exciting, but if you want more info, it's in there. As always, I know that I can't go over every single thing about this camera in this short video, so any questions, any comments that you have, let me know in the comments. Tell me if this was cool. Tell me if this sucked. Tell me if you're unsubscribing from me and never talking to me ever again. Whatever it is, leave it in the comments. I'll see you tomorrow, and I'm gonna close this off with a quick B-roll sequence.